Hi, what is the Alph Hypertext System project? Just Alph for short is fine. It is essentially a one-person research project into the feasibility of building a xanalogical hypertext system within the World Wide Web. That phrase probably needs a little bit of unpacking if you are not really on top of your hypertext history, and especially if you don't know who this guy is. Not this guy. We all know who this guy is. That's Prince Adam. But I mean this guy here. I'm going to put a picture there. And you might also be thinking, at the end of that statement, isn't the World Wide Web a hypertext system already? Yeah, it is. Although it's probably more accurate in the world of 2025 to say that the World Wide Web is a global network applications platform that started out as a hypertext system. So yeah, there's still a hypertext system underneath there, but not a xanalogical one. What is that word, xanalogical, which I've said a few times now? It means in accordance with the sort of concepts, principles, and system model of Xanadu, which is Ted Nelson's original hypertext system concept that he's been working on and advocating for since the 1960s. It's fundamentally a little bit different from the World Wide Web in ways that may seem trivial at first, but which actually have kind of deeper and broader implications, which hopefully will become clearer as we go on. So this video is not a deep dive into the xanalogical system model. That can be another video at another time, but I will open the hatch to the moon pool, so to speak. I'm extending the deep dive metaphor there, with two terse paragraphs which will probably raise more questions than they answer, but here we go. A xanalogical hypertext system is one in which documents are transclusion based and draw from a pool of stable media, and in which links are independent of documents, and the endpoints of links can point through documents to the stable media underneath them. Here's an animation that I made that illustrates the system model, which may not be entirely clear, but there you go. Now we have some moving pictures to look at. Furthermore, a xanalogical systems client software must facilitate side-by-side viewing of documents and resources and visible connections between links, transclusions, things like that, right? So that's what a xanalogical system is in a nutshell. By the end of this video series, that will all make perfect sense, I'm sure. Let's put up the title card. In a xanalogical world, plain text is king. Plain text is great. I love plain text. It's versatile, it's ubiquitous, it's fundamental. Human language, computer language, tabular data, they all reside very happily in the streams of symbols that plain text encodes. We love to dress up prose and poetry in handsome typography. I know I do. I love to do that as much as anyone, but at the end of the day, it's the writing systems in the abstract that matter the most, whether that's an alphabet or a syllabary or an ideographic writing system or whatever. Thanks to Unicode, love it or hate it, all of those things have kind of been brought under one umbrella that allows us to encode the world's languages in plain text stream. It's also one-dimensional. There's no complex data structure to plain text. It's just a sequence of code points, and the importance of that should become apparent later. So the first thing that we need to be able to do with our global xanalogical hypertext system is we need to be able to create and publish and retrieve plain texts from the network. So we'll take a look at how we do that in the Alph systems client prototype, the Docuplextron. Okay, here we are in a blank workspace in the Docuplextron, and what's the first item on our to-do list here is to create plain text. Could be easier. This is plain, not pain, plain text. This is what we call a noodle. Why a noodle? A noodle is just a fragment of plain text that lives in the browser. And it's called a noodle because this was one of Ted's choices. A little bit of history here. I made the first version of this back in 2017. I recorded a video demo and I sent it to Ted back then, and he got back to me a few months later and he was like, hey, that's actually kind of cool. Do you want to work together on something? And I said, yeah, of course I do. So we collaborated briefly, maybe 2-3 months on this, and didn't get any further than just the text editing parts of it. And noodle was the suggestion that Ted made for the name of these little plain text fragments, which is a nod to Leo Tolstoy, who was a old-fashioned manuscript cutter and paster, with scissors and glue or paste. And he called his little manuscript fragments noodles. So Ted said these text fragments should be called noodles. So they're still called noodles to this day. And another thing that was important to Ted about the text editing features of this were that you could do cut and paste that was analogous to how you would do it in paper. Let's say we've got something here that we don't want necessarily. We can just slice this guy in half, set that aside, maybe write something new. Maybe what we want to do is actually create an alternative version of that. So, oops. Here's version 2. And then we decide, we don't want this one. Let's get rid of it. And we want to keep all these, but we want them in a slightly different order. Oops. So let's do that. And then let's paste them all back together into one new thing. There you go. Cut and paste editing in a more visual way, and more that's analogous to how you would do it on paper. So all these little noodles, like I said, they live in the browser. And if you put one away, it disappears from the screen. If you take a look over here in your sources flap, whoops, and take a look down in local sources, noodles, you'll see that there are a couple little plain text guys down here, which you can preview in the flap. And of course, you can double click them to restore them to the workspace and continue editing. There we go. All right, so that's how we create plain text. Next, we might want to publish this plain text to the web, which is easy enough to do. So there are two software components here. There's the Docuplextron, which is what we're looking at right now, the client software, the front end. And then there's also the server, Alph.py. Doesn't have a fun name yet. Maybe someday it will, but it doesn't at the moment. I have a few Alph.py installations running out in the world right now. One of them is on the Alph.io the Alph.io website server, which is where I have this Docuplextron set up to publish to. I can set it up to publish to as many servers as I want to, but all I have to do here is go publish text to server, and I'll get this little repository browser, which lets me browse the file system of that server. And I'm going to go into the temp directory here, and I'm going to create a resource called demo text. These we may see later, but I'm going to turn all these extra little bits off. I don't want to add any information to this. I just want to post the text that's in that noodle right now. And I'll say put. And it's going to ask me two questions here, which may not be immediately relevant. The first one is, if there are any links pointing to this resource, do you want me to change those links so that they now point to the network resource? I'm going to say okay, even though we don't have any links here. And then it's going to say, since we're publishing this to the web, do you want to delete the copy that's in the browser? And I'm going to say, okay, go ahead and delete the copy that's in the browser too. Now, you'll notice that it collapsed all the white space in that. And we can ask this to respect the white space if we wanted to. But now this resource has been plopped up onto the web. If we take a look at the source info for this, it'll tell us that. It'll say, hey, this thing now is out on alph.io/xpub temp demo text. In fact, let's make sure. Let's copy that link, hop into a regular version of Firefox, which is over here on screen too, I think. And ta-da, there it is. It's out there on the web. So cool. All right. So we have written plain text. We have published plain text to the web. And now we will load some other plain text from the web. I already loaded some before, so I'll just pull them back out of my sources. These are over here because I loaded them by typing the addresses up here in the bar earlier. I'll just do it. I'll just type one of the addresses in here to show you. We can leave off the protocol specifier as long as it's a web resource, and we can just put in gutenberg.org ebooks 76899.txt UTF-8, I think is how that's going to be. And pow, it's pulled in this plain text resource from Project Gutenberg, which is great. Let's push it into the background here. In case you hadn't guessed, this is kind of an infinite desktop here, and a zoomable one at that, so I can scale all of these resources, and I can scale the whole workspace. And everything has a little title tab, so if something goes off the screen like that, you can still, its little title tab pops up so that you never lose it. We can either zoom over to this resource, and then maybe zoom back to this resource. Woo. Or we can double click this to summon it into the workspace. We can double click it again to send it away. Or we can all zoom all the way out to find all the stuff that we have on the screen. And yeah, let's get back in here. There we go. Let's load another text resource here. Well, since I've already got one loaded, let's pull this up. There. And that one's coming from textfiles.com. Again, just a plain text resource, nothing super fancy there. And I think that's it for this part. We'll talk about links in a second here, but we have done the things that we needed to do. We wrote some plain text, we published it to the web, and we have summoned some plain text from the web. Great, off to a good start. All right, so we've got a bunch of plain text resources at our disposal now, but where's the hypertext? Hypertext is all about links, right? Xanalogical links are a little bit different than the hyperlinks that most people are accustomed to seeing in web pages. An HTML hyperlink it's a reference to another web resource, or it might be a reference to another location within the current resource that's embedded into the text stream of the HTML file, right? These links are really like sewn into the fabric of the documents. And the browser renders the text that's within the anchor of a link a little bit differently to cue users that they can interact with it in some way, whether that's by pointing and clicking with their mouse, or just tapping the screen with your finger, or arrowing over to it and hitting enter, what have you. And we all know this. You activate a link, and what happens? Your browser jumps to this new location. It provides you a new view on some other resource. That is a mechanic that we all know. It's become intuitive to all of us. It's become intuitive to billions of humans on the planet right now. And for the majority of people, that's kind of what hypertext means. It means text that you click on. But hypertext is a little bit of it's a broader concept than that. And of course, that mechanic of, clicking a link and jumping from one place to another place is just one way of presenting interconnected information. Of course, xanalogical links they're not embedded into the document's text in the same way. They're separate. They exist on a different logical layer from documents. And they can be bundled with documents. When you load up a document, it may have a set of links bundled with it, but you can also, load links from other various sources, other various authors. And remember, a xanalogical browser is going to be a system in which you can view multiple pieces of media at the same time. You can also view multiple layers of links at the same time from different sources, and then those links are just overlaid onto the media that's visible in the workspace at any given moment. It's crucially important in the system that users are able to create and publish their own links, and ideally that's going to be as painless as possible. So let's take a look at how linking currently looks in the Docuplextron. Picking up right where we left off, we've got these two, actually these are all three resources out on the web right now. I'll just create a noodle here. Here's a text resource that is local to this computer. All right, so we've got a noodle down here. We've got this text that we wrote and published to the web. We've got this text that we pulled in from the Gutenberg.org site, and this one which we pulled in from www.textfiles.com. And let's show how we would make some links in here. Before we can make links, we have to figure out where we're going to put the links. Links have to live somewhere. They have to be stored somewhere. And that somewhere is in a graph document of some kind. So we're going to make a graph document that's like a noodle, going to be stored in the browser here. And this little drop down up here tells you what the currently active graph document is. If I make links right now, they'll go into the session graph. The session graph is temporary though. It gets wiped out every time you reload the browser. So let's make a new one, a graph that's going to stick around a bit. We'll give it a name. Demo graph should be good. There we go. And let's link a couple of resources together. Let's do the simplest possible thing, which is just link one resource to another resource. Click on the thing we want to link, fire off the linker. We get 2 pins and a piece of string, because making crazy walls is what it's all about, right? And then we just drop that other pin on the thing that we want to link to. Let's link it to this guy here. Before I hit this link button to store this link, I'm going to give this a relation type. And there are some pre-filled ones. You can also write your own relation types in here if you want to. The most generic one, obviously, is just related. So I'm going to choose related and hit link. And kerpow, we've got a little visible link between these two resources now. If I hover over this, it'll highlight that node. If I hover over this, it'll highlight the other node. If I put this away, you'll see that we've got this little bug here. If I click on it, it'll show me that this node in this graph has a link of the related type to this other resource. And if I click on it, it opens it up. And we can do that in the other direction too. If we close this and we go over here, we click on that, and it'll say this node in this graph has a related link back to this resource. And there we go. I've opened up my noodle too. So we've got bidirectional linking because the links are on this other logical layer. The browser is just aware of these relationships. Anytime one of these pieces of media comes into the workspace, it's going to have a little icon, or in this case, just a little dot put next to it that says, hey, I know of a link that goes off of this. Linking whole resources is cool, but it's more useful to be able to link fragments of resources, like linking a phrase or a keyword to a paragraph or something. So let's do that. Let's link the word Docuplextron here to this paragraph. Now, these things are not actually related. I'm going to leave this on prompt this time and hit link, and it's going to ask me for the relation, and I'm just going to call this an unrelated relationship. When you hover over one of these edges, it'll show you the relationship type. This one's unrelated. This one's related. If you're dealing with a web of a bunch of different types of relationships, it of course will be a lot easier if you color code those. So if we go into the links flap, I only have 2 types of relations being used at the moment, so there are only 2 down here. But we can color these. So we can say, make all the related links yellow, and make all the unrelated links green. There we go. Now we have a yellow link and a green link. If we don't want to see certain types of relationships anymore, we can turn them off. And if we don't want this whole graph to be seen anymore, we can turn it off as well. Okay, that's that. So one thing that we can do here that you can't do in a web page is a couple things. One is I can have multiple links coming off of the same anchor. Easy peasy. Let's put this guy in the background here and pull this guy in. That's probably too big. We don't need it to be quite that big. Let's move some things around too. Actually, let's just put this away. I don't need that cluttering up the screen. Okay, so here we are. What was I just going to show? All right, I was going to show one node linking out to multiple different things, wasn't I? Okay. So if we go up to this node here, it'll say in this graph it has this link to this resource here, but we can just hit the plus sign and we can link additional stuff off of this node as well, like the name Ray Cummings in this text. Any particular reason? No, none. Unrelated. We'll do another unrelated link. And link those. We could even link this to this resource down here. Author. It's not really what it is, but there you go. All right, so now I've got this one, node in the graph that has 3 different things that it's linked to. That's great. The other thing that we can do here is have overlapping link anchors. So I could link, noodle and then half of the word Docuplextron to something. Like this second paragraph. Not for any particular reason, just to show that it can be done. Tag. It's not a tag, but we'll say it is. And there we go. So here's one node that goes up to the middle of the word Docuplextron, and then here's another node that is just the word Docuplextron. They overlap. That's totally fine. To do that here, since we're just the anchors, the nodes in these links they're not embedded in the document, they're just references to a fragment of plain text somewhere, numerical references to a substring of some plain text resource. Easy peasy, right? That's pretty much how linking is done. You might think, okay, but what's an actual application of this? An obvious application would be annotation, right? If you've got a text that you're looking at, such as this short story here, and you are maybe doing a review of it, or maybe this is some text that you're studying. I don't know why you'd be studying this old science fiction short story, but if this was a philosophical text or something like that, you might be reading through it and making yourself notes, annotations as you go along, or linking paragraphs out to other resources that you know about and want to keep track of. The easy way to make, or not easy, the longhand way to make an annotation would be to create a noodle and say, this is something that I want to say about this paragraph. And select the paragraph in question, like this one, link it to that, and give it a relation of note, and hit link. Pow, there we go. Probably a more useful way, though, is to use the sort of shorthand version that I've got in here, which is to make a selection of something, go into the selection menu and say link a note, and then here's the annotation that I want to make. Pow, there we go. And we would proceed on down the text, making annotations as we go. Weird. I love weird stuff. You get the idea. And there we go. That's how you might annotate a document. These annotations are private. They're, these noodles are just stored in the browser. This graph is just stored in the browser. But we could, if we wanted to, publish this stuff and export it so that other people could see it. The UX for graph export is pretty ugly at the moment, but we'll show it anyway, because why not? So if these were annotations that I knew I wanted to share with the world, what I would do is that the first? It's the one that matters anyway. Let's go back to this guy and say publish text to server. Get back on the old repository browser here, go into temp, and we'll say, we'll call this test. And I'll go ahead and leave all these checked this time. And I'll say, put this out to that resource. The usual questions. Do you want to change all of the links that pointed to this noodle to now point to this plain text resource on the web? Yes, I do. So, okay. And would you like to delete the local copy? Yes, I would. And there we go. Once again, this, wrong menu. this now is a web resource. It's out here on alph.io, xpub temp, oh, I spelled it wrong, anot test. And we could pop over to Firefox and look at that, but you'll just have to trust me. And then what I'm going to do is these other annotations, I know since they're all going to be kind of bundled together, they're all annotations to the same resource. I'm just going to keep adding annotations to this text file. I'm going to append to that text resource, which we can do on the Alph server. If you put a resource on the Alph server, it overwrites it. If you post a resource, if you post to a plain text resource, it'll append the plain text. So let's do that. If I go here, well, first thing I'll do, so I'll right click on this resource and I'm going to say, make this our append target. And you'll see that up here. And then while I'm in this noodle, if I just hit Control Enter, it's going to post that to the server, ask me the usual question, change all the links, yes. Delete local copy, yes. And I'll do the same thing down here to this one. Control Enter. Yep. And now these plain text annotations, they're out there on the web. Let's go take a look at what that document looks like. I guess I could have just copied it from up there, but this link here, let's copy that link. Let's pop back over to Firefox, put that in here, and this is what these annotations look like. There's a timestamp, a little bit of information about the noodle, the like internal ID of the noodle and the Docuplextron, and all of the things that I've written. They're all there in that one text document. Let's close this. And in fact, all of these little things here, these are just views on this one text resource. They're just substrings from that text resource. If I right click on this and I say get the source media, it'll pull in that whole plain text file that we've been adding stuff to. There it is. And now you see that we've got quite a mess of spaghetti on this on the screen. Let me explain what's going on there. This node is appearing in two places in the workspace at the same time, right? The browser knows that this bit of text here and this bit of text here, they're not just identical strings. It's the same media coming from the same network resource in two places at the same time. So we'll just get rid of this one to clean up the screen a little bit. Same thing with this one. Let's get that guy back up in here too and close that as well. And there we go. All of our annotations we can see are visibly linked to this, to the relevant parts of this plain text resource. But what about the graph, right? If you wanted to share these annotations with somebody, you wouldn't even need to give them the URL of the plain text resource. You just need to send them like the URL of the thing that you're annotating, and then the URL of the graph that you've made that links to your annotations. So over here in the links flap, the demo graph here, we can just hit export, and I haven't hooked this one up to the repository browser yet, so we just have to put the URL in here. Sorry, ugly. Alph.io xpub temp, and let's export this to anotest.xanalogical. Yes, store it to the server, really. This particular thing, when you export a graph, it also loads it in, put it in a weird place, but it loaded it in, and we can look at the graph here, and there's a button down at the bottom that says import to link store. So if you wrote an instant message to somebody, and it said something like, hey, I was reading this story made some annotations. To remember the URL for that, we can just browse to it. Xpub temp anotest.json ld. Let's copy the link. plop it in there. All right, and you could just send that message to somebody and they'd have the link to this text and they would have the link to this graph. Does it work? I think so. Last time I checked, it worked. Let's kill this graph. Let's delete the internal version of the graph. There, they're gone now. So all those annotation links that we just made, they're not there anymore. This should still be in the clipboard, but we'll load a resource from the clipboard. And there it is. It's this graph here. And we'll say import to link store. And it should be there now. Yep. And then if we turn on the demo graph, pow, links galore. Yeah, that's how that works. The whole link export and import thing is really ugly right now, but it works. At least that's the important part. And there we go. It's a hypertext system with visible links with plain text. Cool. That's not the whole system, but that's all that we're going to talk about in this video, or demonstrate in this video. A technical note, it's worth mentioning. I said before that, hyperlinks on the web are these things that are embedded into the text streams of documents that are sewn into the fabric of web pages. These more abstract kinds of links, of course, exist on the web and have existed for 25 plus years at this point. The link element in an HTML document's head is an example of this, right? This is how style sheets are often loaded and applied to a web page. There's a little tag in the head that says, hey, there's a relationship between this document, a style sheet relationship, with this other resource. Load that resource and apply it. It's not text that you click on. It's a more abstract definition of a relationship. The link header in HTTP transactions, same thing. It basically says there's a relationship between this resource that you're loading right now and this other resource. Here's the nature of the relationship. Do with that information what you will. And RDF, which I don't think this spec came out till 2001 or something like that, but it was talked about in the late 1990s. The resource description framework is a graph description language that's native to the web, and it's all about these triples, these node-edge-node relationships where you've got a resource and another resource and a relationship that's defined by a resource. And then the most recent iteration of that is, of course, the linked data spec, and JSON LD is the serialization for what are essentially RDF graphs. So this kind of abstract linking has actually been around for a long time on the web, and actually that's how I'm implementing links in Alph. It's just linked data graphs, nothing super innovative. I'm trying with Alph to build as much of it as I can out of just off-the-shelf parts, just web components, because I don't really want to reinvent the wheel. I am a hobbyist programmer, and I'm not going to write a whole new browser or anything like that. That would be crazy. Lots of really smart people have been engineering this stuff for decades at this point, so I'm going to reuse as much of that as I possibly can. I'm just kind of taking parts that already exist, reconfiguring them into something that resembles Xanadu. And yeah, that's the aim of the project. Okay, that's the end of this video. In the next video, we'll talk about HTML, how HTML plays into this system, how we can use HTML as a xanalogical document format that's entirely transclusion based, and why that's a good idea. And links that point through document presentations, which I mentioned early in this. We'll get into that in the next one. I'll probably also talk about the way that I'm doing metadata in the system, which isn't strictly a xanalogical thing, but it's something that I think is essential to the system. So I'll mention that in the next video as well. And that's probably enough for part 2. But for part 1, the end.